Oh, I'm sorry. I'm used to just having to talk loud. People can hear me. Madam Clerk, please call the roll for the CVR Safe Committee.
Yes, thank you. Director Branscombe,
Yes.
Clarici, absent Early, absent Jennings, absent Jones,
Here.
Kennedy, Lauren absent, Rickman absent, Sander absent, Singh absent, Vice Chair Boomgarden,
Present.
Vice Chair Chapman, Chair Desmond,
Here.
and ex officio member Aceves.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. And Madam Clerk, would you like to read your message?
Yes, thank you. Are you asking about our message from the clerk?
Yes.
Sure, Desmond. Sure. In compliance with Government Code Section 54952.3, the clerk hereby announces that the compensation for legislative body members attending this committee is $100. Our additional committees and compensation are noted as such in the agenda. Compensation rates for these meetings are set pursuant to the rules for SACOG adopted in May 2024.
Okay, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chair Desmond, if it's okay with you, we would like to just pause for a minute while our tech team is able to just change something over through our
Absolutely.
technology. Is that okay?
Kennedy runs a tight ship.
This is not how you envisioned your first committee going. So far.
I literally just looked at Chapman. I was like, this meeting started at 10, right?
I just got a thumbs up back there from them.
We are now live streaming. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, we are live streaming. We're ready to go with the action items. Do you have to read the item? Do you want to read the item again or no?
Sure, I'm happy to read the item again. Our first action item is number 5, 2026 SACOG federal funding cycle.
All right, good morning. So I'll be presenting an overview of the 2026 federal funding cycle, including the funding outlook, program structure, and implementation timeline for the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality, or CMAQ, and Surface Transportation Block Grant, or STBG funds. So today we're asking the committee to take 3 actions related to the 2026 federal funding cycle. 1 is to adopt the federal funding estimate, 2, approve the program budget, and 3, authorize staff to open the call for projects. So together, these 3 actions formally initiate the funding cycle. However, before I get to the funding overview, I did want to just provide a little bit of context and kind of give a sense of where we've come from to date. So as the region's designated MPO and consistent with federal requirements and the corrective action, SACOG is responsible for administering CMAQ and STBG funds on a region-wide basis. Through a nearly 2-year process, SACOG staff, working with a multi-agency working group, as well as board members, many of which are here today, have completed the transition from a 4-county to a 6-county performance-based federal funding framework that defines how these funds are to be administered. So since then, the program guidelines have been adopted. Funding assumptions for federal fiscal year 28 through 30 are in place. The proposed evaluation criteria and program budget are finalized. And so today's action really allows us to move from that framework development to implementation. So for this cycle, there's expected to be approximately $230 million across the federal fiscal years 28 through 30. So this breaks down to approximately $102 million in CMAQ funds and $128 million in STBG. And that STBG funding will be allocated or split between 2 programs at 65% and 35% per previous board action. And I want to note that these figures are still estimates and assume federal reauthorization. So if any of the funding levels were to change in the future, we would return to the board to discuss that. So in terms of how the funding will be used, it's structured around 3 core programs that balance regional priorities and help implement the blueprint. Approximately 91.9 million of CMAQ funding will be available through the Next Generation Solutions in Air Quality or in Clean Air program. And this program focuses on funding projects that reduce emissions and expand clean mobility. 72 million will be allocated, 72 million of the STBG funds, which is roughly 60 or 65%, will go to the System Performance Program to fund projects that at a high level improve safety, reliability, and the overall function of the transportation system. And then finally, 38.8 million or 35% of the SDBG funds will go to system performance to fund projects that explicitly maintain and extend the life of key arterials. So in addition to the competitive programs, approximately 9.1 million annually or 27.3 million over 3 years is proposed for board-directed priority programs. So collectively, these are investments that support region-wide services, targeted programs, as well as planning and monitoring and implementation activities necessary to administer the federal funding programs and advance regional policies. This includes programs such as the CCAT program, Sustainable Mobility, as well as 2 of the new programs, which are Regional Pavement Management and Freeway Service Patrol. So as it relates to project evaluation for the funding cycle, SACOG will use a standardized performance-based evaluation framework to support consistent and transparent funding decisions. The proposed evaluation criteria were included in today's packet, and that would be applied by a technical evaluation committee, and that committee would be made up of technical experts and staff from various agencies across the region to ensure that all the needs in our region are being represented. But ultimately, the final funding decision will come down to the SACOG board. And at a high level, projects will be evaluated based on deliverability and readiness, financial capacity and cost effectiveness, performance, and alignment with local and regional priorities.
So there's going to be a team put together to do an evaluation and make recommendations.
Correct.
Who?
Generally,
Specifically who? Because if it's going to be filtered in here, it'd be neat to know exactly who the experts are.
We don't typically say specifically who, but what we can say is that they're, you know, representative of the 6-county region so that we're getting all the perspectives, and we have, you know, public works folks, we have technical people there that will be able to make, you know.
It'd be interesting to know who the inputs are.
Yeah, we can share that with you separately if you'd like.
But but we don't know who everyone is yet at this point, right? You don't have,
Not for all of the
Right,
programs.
right.
We have put together the
but
panel.
when you
for-
do, that's something you can share.
Correct.
And just one of the things we try to do is not have those people become the most popular people in the region for a few months. And so we're happy to share names, but it, you know, we want to be mindful too, right? Of just making sure they can do their jobs and do their work. So we'll get back to you.
Organizations and people would be the interesting thing to know.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good, David.
all right, yeah. So in terms of timing, the cycle will begin with the system preservation call for projects in March, with applications due in May and award recommendations anticipated in August. Calls for system performance and next gen programs would occur in June. They would follow a unified schedule with applications due in September and award recommendations in December. And then we anticipate programming and federal authorization activities to begin in early 2027. And I just wanted to note that we staggered these programs for a few different reasons. One, wanting to make sure that we weren't overloading applicants by releasing all 3 programs at once. It allows them ample time to think about and strategize around the projects they're submitting. And two, by doing it in this way, we're able to provide better technical assistance and guidance from the SACOG perspective. So we can offer pre-application consultations and other technical assistance by spreading this out a bit. So again, just to recap, staff is recommending committee approval of the $230 million CMAQ and SDBG fund estimate and program budget, and authorization to open the 2026 federal funding cycle call for projects. So that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, David. I had a couple questions before I bring it back to the board. So just to take us back, just a history, I think it's important to flesh out a little bit how talk a little bit about the competitive funding round working group that was established, both the group of electeds and the technical advisory group. And I think it's important to talk about that a little bit and what our efforts were over the last few years and how the impetus for that was the corrective action, right? I mean, that was kind of an inflection point for us to start down that road. So can you talk a little bit about that? And I don't know if it's David or you or Christina or
I'm happy since David wasn't here for that adventure. Yeah, so.
let's hear your take on it, David.
I think things are working well. Yeah.
He came in at the right time. So yeah, a number of years ago, we were issued a corrective action from FHWA. And essentially in a very short blurb, we were no longer able to sub-allocate funding to our partner counties, both Placer and El Dorado. We were required to run a 6-county competitive process. So to figure out how that would work and make sure that we were understanding all of our partners' needs and thoughts on what that process could look like, we put together a working group and worked for 18-ish months, maybe 2 years. We had one at the board level that had a representative from each of the 6 counties, and one at the staff level where we had multiple representation from the 6 counties at the public works and some planning level folks as well. And spent a lot of time talking about, the corrective action and what it actually meant and what we needed to do, but then really worked through these new guidelines, which are very different in many ways from previous funding rounds that we had administered. Some of the key things are having, what we'll call color of money focused programs. So no longer bundling all of our money together or funding sources. It resulted in that STIP, state only program that we ran last year, because that is for county money. So we no longer could put that with our federal dollars and make it a seamless, smooth process. And so really kind of honing in on these 2 funding programs and what that could mean for the region. One of the big things that came out of this, which is the first program that will be opened, is the System Preservation Program, which is the first time we've had a program that is really focused strictly on maintenance, which is something we heard loud and clear from both the board level and the staff level working groups as something that was needed right now, given, current funding challenges that our partners have. So we worked really hard to get these guidelines to reflect the needs and the kind of wants of the counties as much as we possibly could, and come to agreement. I think it was a really fruitful process, and really, really appreciate the board members' participation in that as well, so that they could really be engaged and be part of that conversation and understand why we were doing this, and help hear from the staff too of what it is that we should be focusing on. So.
All right. No, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's important. It's kind of, yeah, go ahead.
Pardon me, I remember that preservation was part of a 65-35 mix, and it was only the 35.
Correct.
And what was the 65?
That's for the System Performance Program.
And what's that?
That also does.
Preservation is keeping the roads fixed.
Correct.
Okay, so what's performance?
Performance is keeping the roads fixed plus extra things, kind of similar to our maintenance and modernization program before, where you need to do something in addition to maintenance. So it could be transit improvements, it could be active transportation improvements, it could be a number of things. But it also is widened to include transit supportive projects, transit projects, trail projects, bike ped, all of the things that are eligible for that funding at the federal level. We cannot pick and choose what types of projects necessarily are eligible for our program. We still need to make it widely consistent with what the STBG program at the federal level allows for. So it is a much broader scope in what is considered eligible in that.
So this 35-65 mix is something that has been recommended, but it's not in concrete yet?
It is, the board.
No,
has-
the board, excuse me,
Yeah.
no, the board did approve it. And then we had a lot of discussion about those percentages.
Yep.
But part of the discussion was also,
I do
we'll do it this
recall
way and
that.
we can the board can revisit that.
Yes.
We're not set in stone with
But you
those.
say system performance can include some preservation.
Preservation plus, yes. So
I can,
not
I
just
could, I
straight
could almost
overlays.
guarantee you in every jurisdiction served by SACOG, if you ask the people, where would you like the money spent? It would be on fixing existing roads.
Yep.
And so a 50-50 would be much preferable and much more responsive to the needs of the community, at least expressed by people I know.
You all had a robust discussion
Yeah.
on this.
We did.
A few
Well,
months ago.
Maybe it should be reopened because streets are everything.
Well, I mean, I do, and I absolutely appreciate the discussion. You've heard me, talk about it many, many times in SACOG. But the board did already make that discussion or that decision, and that's not within the scope of what we're deciding today, if I'm not mistaken. But the board can go back and revisit that, I think, in
Yes,
successive rounds. if I'm
Would
not
it be
mistaken.
possible to get that on an agenda for the second peak? I remember that. That was some time ago.
that was last year. Yeah,
And the 35 is up from what it would have been, right?
yes, it is. It is a bigger pot than it would have been under our previous estimates. I think we'll look at revisiting it once we get through the program. I think it's important to see how the decision of 35.
I mean, after everything's spent. No, I'd rather talk about it ahead of time.
Well, the board already approved it, unless you want to, ask at
Okay,
the
I'll
board
find
meeting to have it brought back for some kind of reconsideration or something.
Okay, well, I think it's worthy of reconsideration.
And another question I had, Christina, is, so this is a 3-year cycle. This is a little bit of a departure too. Can you explain that? What the thinking is behind that, David, or?
I have the historical knowledge. Yeah, so typically we used to do 2-year funding cycles when it was a 4-county round. We recognize that bringing in 2 counties, one of which is pretty sizable in terms of population and needs, we needed to have more funding available to make it worthwhile. We wanted to be able to fund a good amount, robust amount of projects. And so we opted to do a 3-year cycle to make sure that it was something that would be meaningful for the partners to go through a 6-county round. Again, that is another thing we can revisit depending on what funding levels look like in the future. But
I'm not
Yep.
suggesting that. Right
Yep.
now. I was just asking. Any other board questions or comments?
I have a
Vice Chair
quick
Booza.
comment. Just being part of the funding working group, a lot of robust conversations during the working group. Some of them centered around the same concerns that Director Branscombe had in regards to equity and maintenance. I saw that at the board level as well. I for one, am excited to get this started, knowing that it's always dynamic, right? We're going to get through a series here, see how it works. If it needs to be tweaked, that option certainly is there. And for me, I appreciate the work of the staff and the working group because again, a lot of different opinions and all those were heard, which was, I think, very helpful to this particular product. We'll see how this series works. I'm good to go.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Any public comment on this item? Madam Clerk?
There's no public
No
comment.
public comment, okay. Bring it back to the board then for a motion. We have 3, I think, distinct items, if I'm not mistaken. One is to approve the estimates, approve the budget, and approve the call for projects, correct? Correct. Okay, we have a motion from Director Chapman, a second from Director Kennedy. Why don't we just take a roll call vote on this one, Lynette?
Director Branscombe? Director Clarici absent. Early?
Aye.
Jennings absent. Jones?
Aye.
Kennedy? Lauren absent. Stander absent. Vice Chair Boomgarden?
Aye.
Vice Chair Chapman?
Aye.
And Chair Desmond?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. And I also want to echo the sentiments about staff. This has been tough. A lot of these tough discussions and an important part of those discussions was that this board will not be locked in, and there's, it was a tough balancing act, I think, getting to where we are even today. So, okay, next item.
Our next item is agenda item number 6, 2027 Regional Active Transportation Program Policy Framework, and staff Summer Lopez will present the item.
Summer?
Thank you. Good morning. So I'm Summer Lopez. I'm on our transportation team. Today I'm presenting the 2027 Regional Active Transportation Program Policy Framework. This is an action item. We had this last month, so I'm just going to give a recap of what we talked about. A quick reminder that ATP, Active Transportation Program, is a statewide program that's meant to increase walking and bicycling throughout the state. We're expecting about $619 million for our statewide program and about $17.3 million for our region. SACOG's MPO component is managed in partnership with Placer County Transportation Planning Agency and El Dorado County Transportation Commission. So here's our timeline again. Here we are today with the little bike. It's the consideration for the policy framework adoption. Up next, we will have the statewide call for projects open this month, and then they will close in June, and then our regional call for projects will open in June and close in September. And then the list will come back to you next year for approval, list of projects. So again, there are 3 categories of proposed changes for the regional ATP policy framework: administrative changes, updating the regional disadvantaged community definition for consistency with the blueprint, and adding funds from the carbon reduction program to ATP for trails. Just a really quick recap on those. The administrative changes are language clarity, language updates for clarity and consistency with our statewide guidelines, removing any language related to that cycle 7 budget deficit amendment that we had last cycle, and then clarifying the trail definition. So not changing anything, just adding some clarification to what that means. We've also updated the regional disadvantaged communities definition to be consistent with the 2025 blueprint. And this was an item we had some discussion around last month. So I wanted to remind everyone of the scoring process for disadvantaged communities. So every single ATP project receives up to 10 disadvantaged community points. However, those points are only applied in the event that we don't meet our board-approved 40% threshold of funding being directed to disadvantaged communities. Every cycle we have met or exceeded that threshold, and so we've never had to apply these points, but they are there for us if we need to apply them. If you are interested in seeing the full scoring criteria, it is in the policy framework. Nothing has changed, and that's in attachment A of your packet. And then lastly, we propose to include the carbon reduction program funding for trails as part of the cycle 8 call for projects. So back in 2023, the board adopted a set aside of carbon reduction program funding for both mobility zones and trails. And so once a decision has been made on mobility zones, which I believe is your next item on your agenda, we should have about $3.2 million available for trails. And so that would bring our total this cycle to $20.5 million for the regional ATP. So again, this is an action item. We're requesting that the Transportation Committee recommend that the board adopt the 2027 Cycle 8 Regional ATP Policy Framework. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Summer, any questions?
Comment, very well presented. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. To approve. The motion from Vice Chair Boomgarten, second from Director Kennedy. Let's just stick with a roll call vote if you don't mind. It's a small group.
Sure.
Aye.
Thank you, Director Branscombe, for your aye vote. Clarici is absent. Early?
Aye.
Jennings is absent. Jones?
Aye.
Kennedy? Lauren absent. Sander absent. Vice Chair Boomgarten?
Aye.
Vice Chair Chapman?
Aye.
And Chair Desmond?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Summer. Next item.
Our next item is agenda item number 7, Mobility Zones Early Action Project Approval, and staff Kathleen Aziz will present the item.
Kathleen.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So this item, as the clerk mentioned, is an action item. So what we are considering before you today is the approval of the 6 projects that have been identified throughout the 6-county region as part of the Mobility Zones program. In my presentation, I'm going to give you a bit of background on the Mobility Zones project. We've been working on this for 2+ years. So it's a big decision before you today we're excited about. Most of the funding that is on for recommendation is carbon reduction program funding. So I'm also going to give you a bit of background on that funding source. Then we'll go through the 6 projects that are recommended for funding, both how we came to the decision on those 6 projects and also what is entailed in each project. And then talk a bit about what next steps look like for the 6 early action projects, as well as the other 27 projects that are not recommended for funding today. So the Mobility Zones project is funded by a federal RAISE grant. And so we are currently wrapping up the 3rd of 4 phases. We've been to the board at every milestone throughout the process, with the first phase really focused on identifying goals and criteria. Then it was really a mapping exercise, trying to figure out where those 10 mobility zones would be in our region to focus on for phase 1. And then the work that's culminating in the action before you today has been all about identifying and prioritizing projects within each of those 10 zones. Just to remind you all, these are the 10 mobility zones that were adopted by the board in May of 2025. You also have a printout before you that shows both this regional scale map and individual maps for each of the 10 mobility zones. For anyone joining us online or in the room, that's also linked in the staff report. After the board adopted those 10 phase 1 mobility zones, we conducted a needs assessment to understand what are the real transportation, travel needs in each of these zones. That was brought before the board as an information item in September of 2025. These themes shown in the gray boxes here are sort of common issues that we saw across the 10 mobility zones, although there's a great deal of variety in place type across these 10 places. Since September of last year, the focus has really been on building on those transportation challenges that were identified. What are projects that could solve those transportation issues? And so we started in the summer with about more than 100 ideas from the community on what transportation improvements in those 10 zones could do to help address their issues. And we've been working through a multi-stage screening process to get that down to the 6 early action projects that we've scoped for funding throughout this whole project. We last came to the board in December of 2025 and presented the process that we were using to prioritize each of these projects, and also provided you the list of 33 projects that we were sort of winnowed down to at that point in time. That full list of 33 projects is also linked in the staff report today. And so the update today is the process that we've been through, going from that list of 33 projects down to the 6 recommended for funding. I'll also note that when we came to Transportation Committee in December, the committee requested that we provide a mid-process update between the 33 and the 6, and that was included on receive and file in February. So that's all the background on the Mobility Zones project. Now a little bit about the type of funding that is recommended for award today. Carbon Reduction Program is a formula federal fund that was created in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act federal bill in 2021. It's 6 county federal funds, and the SACOG region received $22.6 million over 5 years. In 2023, the board took action on how to direct the use of those CRP funds, and there was both a near-term strategy and a long-term strategy. The near-term strategy was to run a competitive funding round, which happened in 2024, and then the long-term strategy, as Summer mentioned in the previous item, was to fund both the projects identified from mobility zones and to fund trail projects in the region. And so this item, item 7, and the framework, item 6, both implement the board's direction from 2023 on that long-term strategy. Here's what this looks like in terms of who's been the recipient of Carbon Reduction Program funds. So the blue column shows you the competitive Carbon Reduction Program round that was in June of 2024. $7.6 million was awarded to the listed agencies there on the left. There's also attachment C in your staff report. It includes the list of each of those projects and how much funding each project received if anyone would like to refer to it. And so then if we look at the pink column, this is the item before you today, is looking at $8.6 million of Carbon Reduction Program funding recommended to these agencies, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail. And then as Summer mentioned, looking to put the remainder, $3.2 million, into the Cycle 8 Active Transportation Program to fund trails. Okay, so that's all the background. Now we'll talk a bit about the process to identify the 6 projects that are recommended and then what those 6 projects are. So back in December, we started with the 33 high priority projects. These are projects that came out of community identified needs in the mobility zones and were vetted by local jurisdiction partners, city, county, public works, or transit operators that said, you know, this is a project we could do, it fits in the right of way, it works from a technical perspective. We took those 33 projects and evaluated them in two ways. First, using a technical evaluation. The results of that technical evaluation is in attachment E to your staff report. This looks at how responsive is this project to crashes in the area? How many new destinations does it help residents access? Sort of how does it perform from a transportation perspective? We also did a robust round of community engagement in October and November to understand how residents of these 10 zones and folks who frequent these 10 zones felt about the 33 projects and which ones might be more or less of a priority. I want to give a special thank you to our partners at Civic Thread who are in the room today, who helped conduct a lot of this outreach throughout the 6-county region. We were able to engage more than 2,000 people in those 10 zones over 4 weeks. We were at senior centers eating dinner and giving out Halloween candy and really talking to people about transportation. So it's an incredible amount of work that they were able to accomplish and really speaks to how much community support there is for the 6 projects recommended before you. We took the results of both the technical evaluation and the community engagement and brought them to the project's advisory committees. These advisory committees were stood up at the beginning of mobility zones, and we've been meeting with them quarterly throughout the process prior to each major recommendation coming before you all as the Transportation Committee and the full board. So that group met in December and in January. It includes community advisory committees with community leaders and also technical and municipal advisory committees with partner agency staff. And then they have vetted and prioritized the projects that were ultimately here for recommendation. And so the final step in the process is the actions this month before the Transportation Committee and the board to approve these 6 projects and award funding. So all that preamble, here are the 6 projects that are recommended for award. There is 1 in each county. That's consistent with the 2023 carbon reduction program action that the board took. So in Sacramento County, the recommended project is a Florin bus stop bundle. This project improves 13 different bus stop locations along Florin Road and along Bruceville Road in South Sacramento. It's a construction project with a recommended award of $1.3 million. In Yolo County, the recommended project is the Woodland Transfer Point project. This project takes the existing Woodland Transit Center in the County Fair Mall and relocates that transit center to a transfer point downtown in the city of Woodland. This aligns with Yolo Transportation District's short-range transit plan and overall moves this key transit point to a much more walkable area with a lot better access and destinations for folks riding transit. It's a $1.07 million funding recommendation for construction. In Placer County, the recommended project is a Bowman Road sidewalk infill project. Bowman Road is a frontage road of Interstate 80 in the unincorporated North Auburn community. And so this closes a key sidewalk gap closure outside of a school where a lot of students are walking to get from the school grounds into the neighboring community. And so this closes that gap by constructing sidewalks. So it's a almost $6 million recommendation for construction. In El Dorado County, the recommended project is the Georgetown Crossings project. So this is in the unincorporated community of Georgetown. It's Main Street. So you can see that there are 3 different intersections shown in the graphic on the right where there would be crosswalk and bulb out improvements to improve pedestrian visibility and crossing safety. This is key for both residents who frequent this area, but also for the kind of economic development of this Main Street when they have major events and lots of folks kind of crossing back and forth here. It's also a construction award for $1.75 million. And then in Sutter County, the recommended project is a Sanborn sidewalks and bus stop project. So you can see in the map that it extends on the eastern side of Sanborn Road from Nand down to Bogue. So this both installs sidewalks and then provides upgrades to a bus stop that exists on that stretch of road right now where there's no sidewalk. So currently the bus stop is just in the roadway, in the shoulder. And so this would provide more space for folks to safely board and disembark off the bus. I'll also note that this project provides a critical pedestrian and bicycle connection to the Sikh temple, which is just around the corner on Bogue Road. And last but never least, the recommendation for Yuba County is for a volunteer driver program study. This is the only non-construction award recommended on the list, and this is at the request of the unincorporated Yuba County community that we worked with, particularly the folks up in the Yuba foothills. And so what this study would look at is the extent to which it's possible for Yuba Sutter Transit to provide volunteer driver service to be able to give those communities out in the Yuba foothills better access into Marysville and Yuba City, which is what they need for groceries and medical appointments and all of their kind of major essential activities. There are currently some more informal types of volunteer driver programs that the community has happening in Yuba County to already close this gap. So this is thinking, how could we formalize this and expand it potentially to continue this critical transportation need for those rural folks? And so because it's a study, it's the least expensive project at $100,000. So thinking about next steps, for the 6 projects that are recommended for early action funding before you, SACOG staff will work with the implementing agencies to get those funds actually moved over. There's a bit of a paperwork process for that. And then we'll be supporting those partners in delivering those projects over the next couple of years. Each project's on a slightly different timeline. Some are able to start construction very soon. Others need to put in a little bit more design and environmental work to prepare. But they'll all be delivered over the next 5 years or so. We want to be really clear that the 6 that are recommended for funding aren't the only 6 good projects on the list. There are a lot of other great projects on the list of 33 that were identified through this process. And so the next step of work for those 27 other high priority projects is to do some analysis on what do they need to be able to move forward. Are they ready for funding? Do they need some grant strategy support? Do they need some additional project development to be ready for funding in the future? And then we're looking at how SACOG could provide that technical assistance with consultant support or just with staff to be able to get those 27 other projects ready to go. And so that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. Kathleen, I'll start with Director Kennedy.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I've been asked by Regional Transit to say thank you for the recommendation. It will make a difference, but also as the supervisor who represents the area that the Florin zone is in, it's also very similar to the AB 617 boundaries as well as the SERP. Curious, which is great because if you put them all together, we're making a bigger community impact. So it's leveraging funding from other sources to make a bigger impact. And we know that the SERP has the same goals as SACOG does. So I just wonder, was that happenstance or do you consider such things when you're making these recommendations?
It wasn't happenstance, but in the process that the state uses to identify the SERP zones, the AB 617 zones, which are areas of air quality and inequity throughout the state, are used similar kind of base criteria that we use in the analysis to develop mobility zones, but not all the same. And so we found a lot of overlap in particularly the urban core of our region, places like North Sac, Bright Broderick, South Sac, where these areas light up a lot, showing up in mobility zones. But I think critically, the process that we use for mobility zones recognize a bit better some of the inequities that happen in the rural and suburban parts of our communities, where sometimes statewide efforts don't light up from a statewide perspective.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Baumgartner, or Vice Chair Baumgartner.
Probably should know this answer, but what's the outlook for continued funding for other projects as we move down the road for mobility zones?
So in the list of 33 projects, 27 of which are left, there's a big range of project type and a big range of competitiveness within that. Some projects I think will be competing in the federal funding round that you just issued a call for projects for 2 items ago, right? They're sort of big projects that there's a lot of jurisdiction support for, which is great. And so some of the mobility zones work can help make their grants more competitive. And there are other projects that are more unique to the circumstances of this project, very equity focused, very community engagement focused, very carbon reduction alternate modes focused, which as we know is a changing landscape when it comes to transportation funding. So that's a lot of the toolkit work that we want to do over the next year or so with those 27 projects is look at each one individually and understand what are its competitiveness in the existing climate, what could make it more competitive, and what support can SACOG provide to close that gap.
Yeah, thanks for that question too, because I kind of follow up on that with the other 27 projects. when will, and I understand some of them may get funded other ways, and when might we see additional projects come before us for funding strictly as a mobility zone project?
We don't currently have a process that would
Okay.
say we're going to bring a phase 2 of mobility zones. So what we want to do is figure out, okay, how many of those 27 would benefit from that? And then have ongoing discussions about what do future phases of mobility zones look like.
Okay.
We're still doing a lot of learning though from this process. And so we want to kind of close out this first section, do those learnings, take the learnings from EEI as well, which is a very similar program, and then sort of figure out what to do moving forward with
Okay.
both.
Will we have discussion about it again this year, do you think, though, Kathleen? Will any of that come back?
We're going to come back in the fall with the toolkit updates. So sort of the status of each of those
Okay,
27
okay.
projects and the analysis
So we'll
we've
have a little
done,
more
but not,
information about some of those. and
That's
it may-
right.
It may no longer be 27. Some may have fallen off because of other.
that's right.
Yes, Director Early?
So on behalf of YTD, I was chair last year, and one of the things that we put in front of us was really getting that transit center for really, it's in Woodland, but for the entirety of public transportation across the county. Where it's currently located is challenging and in a place where a lot of the spaces have closed around it. There are oftentimes homeless encampments, and it just doesn't feel safe. And so, particularly if you are from a vulnerable community, you are traveling as a kid, it can feel like public transportation isn't for you. But when you don't have a choice, then that's just what you got. And so, this is something that we've been working on in Yolo County, having a safe transit center for 6 years. And last year we said, okay, this is going to be the year that we tackle this and make it happen. And so, on behalf of YTD, thank you so much for doing this. It is going to transform lives and public transportation in Yolo County. And so it's an amazing project and full support.
I expect we have a motion in a second over here when the time is right. Any other board comments or questions? Any public comment?
There is 3 public comments.
Oh,
One of
I do.
them-
I have them in front. I have 2 in front of me.
Right, and then I
Good.
just would point out to you that there was a written public comment. That was a letter from Breathe California that's at your seats and posted online and at the
And-
back table for the public.
And our practice is to read the whole thing, but is that chair's discretion?
We actually don't,
Okay,
we've
good.
changed our procedure on that, so that has
But
been
you all have a copy of
distributed.
it. Everybody has a copy.
Yes, correct.
Okay, then let's go with the 2 that are in person. We'll start with Daisy Romero. Good morning.
Good morning. You beat me to my first line. Hello and good morning, Chair Desmond and members of the committee. My name is Daisy Romero. I am the Director of Transit Operations at Yolo Transportation District. I'm here today to urge your support for staff's recommendation to award $1.07 million in the Mobility Zones funding for the Woodland Downtown Transfer Point project. This funding would fill a critical need in Woodland and Yolo County by relocating our transit hub from a nearly abandoned mall on the edge of town to a central location in downtown Woodland. This project will increase safety for thousands of monthly bus riders who must change buses at the mall, where we receive regular reports of safety concerns. Additionally, this project will improve accessibility to downtown Woodland, which currently lacks direct transit access to key regional destinations. This project will create a one-seat bus ride from downtown Woodland to key destinations such as UC Davis, downtown Sacramento, and the Sacramento Airport. It's clear that the community understands this need. Within the Mobility Zones community engagement process, the Woodland Downtown Transfer Point emerged as a top-ranked project among the 7 candidate projects in Yolo County. Lastly, I want to commend SACOG for pursuing this innovative approach to funding that centers the viewpoints of community members. Transit-dependent people don't often show up to meetings like this, so we applaud SACOG staff for finding ways to reach out and make sure their voices are heard through this process. Lastly, I'm available to answer any questions you may have about this project, and thank you again for your opportunity to provide this input.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Simone McKinley. Good morning.
I am, was on the Placer County and El Dorado County commission or committee for the community members. I was not planning on being here today, but my conscience is eating at me. So I'm just going to read this. My name is Simone McKinley. I sit on the Placer County Mobility Zones Community Committee member. We helped build this program from day one and decide what these metrics were going to be. Um, I am a UC Davis grad and a former chef turned grant writer. I work a lot with equity projects and social science projects. I lived in the north part of Auburn, where one of the mobility zones was identified for almost 4 years. Joining this committee was close to my heart because while I was living there, I developed a medical condition that I wasn't anticipating and ended up not being able to drive anymore. So I went from being a pedestrian to not a pedestrian, or other way, not a pedestrian to a pedestrian. And it's a very big shift in your life when taking walks is not just something you want to do for fun. We were, I don't know how to say this. I have since found out, after being very uncomfortable with a vote the last time that we met as a committee for Placer County, that the zone that was brought in, the one that you are choosing to vote on today, Bowman, it's not in a place that we identified as a group. It was put on there for us. We were not asked if it could be added or told that it was going to be added. We were all very confused after that. I've spoken with 3 of the community committee members besides myself. They were not available to be here today, so I can't speak for them, but I can say that we were all very similarly surprised and unsure if we had just missed something individually or if there was a gap in information. I was curious to see what the parameters were for the grant that created mobility zones, so I dug into where that came from. And while I was looking, I discovered a project that's literally right there. So I don't know if this is something that's already known or how it works, because I don't work with you guys. But it, from my perspective, looks like the sidewalk
30
that
seconds.
Okay, thank you. That is being put in is going to a future project that SACOG has already given somebody else a grant for, which to me looks like a pretty heavy conflict of interest. And that was never brought to our attention. I feel like that's something we should have known from the beginning, that there was already a financial commitment there while we're looking at the county for places to identify.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Simone. Kathleen, I mean, is there any feedback or response to that, please?
Sure. So I just want to.
I'm sorry, I have to jump in here.
Oh.
Just wanted to say that we can't really go back and forth in response to a comment. You can touch on it briefly, but.
Okay, well, I'll ask the question this way. In relation to the Placer County project, does, I guess, the ultimate, what was before us today, did that maybe differ from the original application or how that project was initially envisioned when it was originally brought forward?
Sure. So this has been a multi-step process. So in last summer, the community identified, as we started at the top of our inverse triangle, more than 100 projects. And then there was an iterative process between what the community requested as transportation challenges in our community workshops and what the jurisdictions said is feasible. And so there were some cases, including in Placer County, where there were projects that, okay, community requested a sidewalk over here on Street A, but the right of way in that location and where the property lines are make it so that sidewalk is not possible to be put on that location, at least not without lots of greater challenges than mobility zones can fund. And so looking at, okay, if we can't do it on Street A, where is a similar location where we might be able to add sidewalks that has a similar benefit? So that process went from June until August, September of last year. Since August, September of last year, the list of 33 projects has been consistent. And that's what was brought to the community committees and the municipal and technical committees in December and January for their discussion and recommendation, and then what ultimately formed the 6 projects before you.
Great, that's helpful. Any other comments or questions from board members? Okay, and no additional public comment, so I'll entertain a motion.
Over seconds.
Okay, we have a motion and a second from Directors Kennedy and Early. Please call the roll.
Thank you. Director Branscombe?
Aye.
Clarici absent. Early?
Aye.
Jennings absent. Jones?
Aye.
Kennedy?
Aye.
Lauren absent. Vice Chair Boomgarden?
Aye.
Vice Chair Chapman?
Aye.
Desmond?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. All right, that'll take us to our information items.
Our first information item is agenda item number 8, 2026 Regional Trail Implementation Strategy Draft, and that will be presented by SACOG staff Summer Lopez.
Good morning, still Summer Lopez. Today I'm presenting alongside Mia Candy, our consultant from Tool Design on the draft regional trail implementation strategy. So we will give a quick overview of the project, share at a high level what our partner engagement and technical assistance has looked like over this last year and the strategies that were developed throughout this effort. And then we'll wrap up with next steps. The Regional Trail Network was adopted by the board back in 2022 and contains over 1,000+ miles of connected bicycle and pedestrian multi-use paths or trails throughout the region. In front of you, there is a printed map of the network as well as a timeline of the entire trail network story that's on the back side of the map. Unfortunately, I don't have time to share the full story today, but I do want to highlight that it has been almost a decade since SACOG started talking to partners and ideating around the regional trail network. Since the 2022 Regional Trail Network Plan was adopted, over 40 miles have been constructed, with many projects graduating from study corridors to planned trails. So study corridors being projects in the vision stage or something that was just simply an idea to being an actual planned trail. So we have 40 miles constructed and several graduating from study corridors to planned trails. The purpose of this 2026 Regional Trail Implementation Strategy is to move projects through the implementation pipeline. That means that no matter where our partners are in the implementation process, there is some way that we can support them to help get their project from vision to construction. This strategy is meant to help guide that work so we can help support project implementers. I'll now pass it to Mia to go over the work that we've done and a high-level overview of the strategies.
Thanks, Summer. So advancing the regional trail network requires really close and ongoing coordination with all of SACOG's partners. During this project, we reestablished the 2022 Regional Trails Working Group. And so this is a group made up of city agencies, county agencies, transportation agencies, advocacy or nonprofit organizations like the Rails to Trails Collaborative, as well as obviously SACOG staff and general counsel. We met with the group 5 times over the course of the project. And this was so that the group could inform the process, but it was also an opportunity for them to do kind of peer learning and peer exchange. There was a lot of sort of helping one another troubleshoot their implementation challenges. We also presented to your group, the Transportation Committee, 4 times, as well as in addition to today, and we will be back here in April to present the final Trails Plan. Over the course of the last 18 months, SACOG and the consultant team has held over 50 one-on-one interviews with agency partners in an attempt to make sure that we are updating the regional trail network appropriately. Next slide. One of the key questions that we were asking during those conversations is what are the implementation challenges that all local agencies are facing when trying to implement trail projects? And so there were a ton, over 35, but we grouped them into 7 main categories. So those are the interface between rail and trail, securing right-of-way and ownership for trail development, ensuring interagency coordination and partnerships, sometimes in the face of competing priorities and needs, ensuring community and political buy-in and support. Of course, funding is a perennial issue, environmental review, compliance, and permitting, kind of navigating those processes. And then our 7th category is other miscellaneous challenges. Next slide. It was really important to SACOG that this project was not just another planning process, but that it actually meaningfully helped advance trail projects on the regional trail network. And so to do so, we created SACOG's first ever trail-specific technical assistance program. Through this program, we provided assistance to 15 local agencies for 18 individual trail projects. On the screen is just an example of a summary that we created of one of the trail projects, just to show you what the technical assistance looked like. So in this specific case, it's an urban context. We worked with the city of Rancho Cordova to do some conceptual design for an on-street, all ages and ability trail connection. Next slide. And just to give you a sense of the real cross-section of projects, this is an example from a more rural context. So this is Placer County, where we worked with the agency to develop a funding strategy, as well as develop materials to support them in grant applications. And then as a direct result of this, Placer County applied to SACOG's project list, which is exactly the type of outcome that we want to be seeing and why we created the program in the first place. Next slide. In addition to those projects, through the Technical Assistance Program, we developed custom implementation strategies for 10 trail projects. We developed these 2-page cut sheets. We sat down with agency staff, we interviewed them, we asked them, you know, what's going on with this trail project? What's the status of it? What are your needs? What implementation challenges are you facing in moving it forward? And then for each, we developed a series of custom implementation and next steps recommendations. And then for most of them, we also helped them understand what the cost would be of the next phase, whether that was design or feasibility or applying for grants, etc. So again, we just have an example here of an urban context. This was one from Roseville. Next slide. And then this is an example of one of the rural cut sheets that we created. So this was for a trail project in El Dorado County. Next slide. Really at the core of this process was SACOG's desire to articulate what is SACOG's role in advancing the regional trail network, given that the agency doesn't have direct implementation jurisdiction over any trail segments. Next slide. Summer talked a little bit about this implementation pipeline concept diagram that we created. And one of the things I want to highlight is that if you look at all the various phases of project implementation, from community engagement to feasibility analysis, environmental compliance, design, construction, maintenance, local agencies, SACOG's partner agencies, are responsible for leading every single step of the process. And so one of the things we've done in the implementation strategy is to, for each of these steps, identified what is SACOG's role in supporting the agencies through these. So for example, we know that local agencies are responsible for all maintenance of trails, but SACOG is in a good position to help local agencies. For example, if there's a cross-jurisdictional trail, SACOG can help facilitate cross-jurisdictional coordination, provide examples of interjurisdictional and interagency maintenance agreements. So those types of strategies. Next slide. But really at the core of this plan was identifying what are the strategies that SACOG as an agency can lead. And so we identified 7 types of strategies, which are shown here on the screen. And for each of them in the plan document, we have 3 to 6 direct actions that SACOG staff can take to help local agencies advance projects. For each type of strategy, we have 1 priority action that SACOG is going to take over the next 5 years. And so I'll walk through those in a minute. Under partnership strategies, SACOG's priority action is to formalize and sustain that regional trails working group that I mentioned before. Under data and prioritization, the agency is going to continue managing the regional trail network database. And part of that is keeping up to date important information about project status, readiness, progress, things like that, as well as regional, important regional data like safety and population and public health. SACOG will develop regional communication and messaging resources that all local agencies can use. These are particularly important when navigating things like tricky community outreach, when trying to secure, kind of political buy-in for projects. So for example, a resource like what are the benefits of trails, or how to have a conversation with community members who are concerned about safety and maintenance along a trail. One of the main resources that SACOG have is staff and staff time. And so they plan to use those resources to help local agency navigate tricky regulatory processes like permitting or meeting certain design requirements. This also involves acting as a liaison where possible with agencies like Caltrans and Union Pacific. And then the final 3 are kind of some of the most important ones. So under technical assistance, SACOG is going to continue the technical assistance program that we established. They're going to start initiating a phased approach to exploring governance options. That's what we talked with you all about the last time we met. Summer can talk a little bit more about what that looks like. And then finally, making sure that there is a SACOG coordinated regional funding program specifically for trails. And I think that's been mentioned during a couple of previous presentations today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Summer to talk about what the next 2 years look like.
Yeah, thank you, Mia. So this year, our focus will be to invest in partnerships by chartering and formalizing our working group continuing our robust implementation-focused trail technical assistance program and funding. So 2 highlights of that are that you all just approved the next iteration of the Trail TA program on the consent calendar. And then you've also just approved the trail funding and the regional ATP. So we're already making progress on this implementation strategy. Starting next year in 2027, we will dive into some of the other strategies, like continuing our conversations on how governance or innovative funding strategies could function and updating the regional trail network. This implementation strategy is step 1 of many conversations that we hope to have in identifying the best step forward to better support agencies as they navigate implementation barriers and ultimately construct the regional trail network. So next month, we will be back to request adoption of the implementation strategy. And your packet has currently only the executive summary in chapter 1. However, there is a link in the staff report for the full document if you're interested in reviewing that. And so we're happy to take any questions or comments that you have on this draft document.
Thank you, Summer and Mia. Any questions or comments? Yes, Director Branscombe.
Thank you, Summer. And I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry.
Mia.
So you've got the strategies and tactics listed there. What's the envisioned end state? And not just everything dark green, right? But maintenance, what is the end state that you're looking for? We've got all these, 7 or 8 or whatever they are, and I'm not picking on you. It's just, they have to connect to something. And what is that?
Yeah, great question. So if you take a look at the map, I think the goal is to have dark green. It would be wonderful if we could construct the full regional trail network. And there's also some yellow highlighted areas on the map, which.
Okay, then if it's not the entire light green to dark green, then what is it? That'd be interesting to know.
Okay.
The exact dimensions of your end state that you have in mind, because these are planned, right? Well, planned. But I think it was 0 to 5 years. We're looking at a 5-year window. Be interesting to know what is the end state in terms of light green to dark green within that 5-year window. And then I hear these discussions of management, oversight, what have you. What's that? And if you don't have it now, that's fine, but it's the kind of thing you always want to have an end state in mind when you're talking strategies and tactics, and be able to present that end state. And in that 5-year period, we want to be here. And if it's not all of it, that's fine. It's a target, and then you get measured by the target. We all get measured because we're all involved in it. And
Yeah,
that's not a comment, that's just an observation. It's not a criticism. Okay.
I think I do have a response though on some of it. So for the end goal piece, like in the next 5 years, I don't expect we're going to have the full regional trail network constructed. It's a big, that's a big ask.
Needs to be said. Then, go ahead.
Sure. I think what we plan to do is by offering different funding sources and by providing technical assistance and by eventually potentially leading to some governance model, we could then support the construction of the network. But it still will be, up until we make any serious governance discussion or decision, the plan will be to continue allowing having the jurisdictions individually implement and plan their projects.
Just a final comment.
Sure.
I think 5 years is the kind of window you need for an undertaking like this. So define that end state in terms of dark green. What do you hope to make dark green? And what do you think governance or responsibilities, local communities' responsibilities are going to be with respect to it? Because that's a little easier to follow. If you understand what that is, then it's easier to understand all the pieces that you've got in motion in the 0 to 2 and 0 to 5 year windows. Just a comment and an encouragement. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Branscombe. No, I think it's important to see where we expect to have these gaps closed. I mean, the end game for me is where Director Branscombe can get on his bicycle in Marysville and ride it all the way down to, the Delta, right?
Yes.
On a trail. Okay, any other comments or questions?
I have a quick one.
Oh, yes. Vice Chair.
Union Pacific. Major hurdle. I mean, is in all this, is there some strategies to perhaps leverage their cooperation? I know it's a big issue for us in our county, especially as we try to get over to Yuba County, et cetera. I see the nodding heads, but
Yes, so we do have some strategies laid out in the plan for how we can address that. The things that we've already started to do is begun conversations involving James, where we're able to leverage the support we have here at SACOG to move the conversations along. We've also, through our working group, had a lot of peer-to-peer support where the jurisdictions have begun to either work together or share contacts with each other, and just kind of begin those conversations and where we could see it leading with Union Pacific. It's also, from what I've heard, just been very helpful to have the peer-to-peer support, hearing the different stories from around the region of what people have been dealing with around Union Pacific. And it's also really informed the type of support that we've been able to provide. But ultimately, we do have some plans to hopefully eventually look towards bundling projects and maybe be able to move those forward in one piece, that we could then work, James could help support working with Union Pacific. And, you know, there may even be, in some of the earlier conversations we had, we really got to understand what the process is that Union Pacific has. It's very specific. They want an account set up with funding where the jurisdiction has to pay them to come out and see the site and review the projects and things like that. So we have some recommendations for what role SACOG could play potentially in supporting the funding side of those things. So there's a lot that we could help around in the future. And again, the governance and funding piece, I think, does matter in that conversation, and we'll continue that in the coming year or so.
thank you.
Okay, Director Branscombe, thank you. Yeah, Union Pacific, difficult organization to partner with at times on local projects.
Chair Desmond, if I could jump in, and Director Branscombe is leaving now, but I do think it's a really good question, right? Where do we want to be in 5 years? It's the same question we have with our blueprint, our 2025 blueprint. We're looking out to the year 2050, but we actually are looking at the next 5 years and the things that we need to make progress on, right? And so I don't know if Summer and Mia have the answer to that question right now, but I will tell you, 6 years ago, we never had this, right? 6 years ago, if you were applying to the state of California for a trail project, it was a 3-mile trail project. It was not part of a 1,000-mile vision. And we have done better and better with this as the framework to be competitive for state grants. So everything from the Dry Creek Greenway to all the trails up in Roseville, to the El Dorado County, Missouri overcrossing up in El Dorado County, right to the Del Rio Trail that's now open, to the Cripple Creek Trail, the Arcade Cripple Creek Trail in Citrus Heights. So those things are moving. And Summer's been giving you presentations over the last few months about, you know, here's how many trails we envision, here's how many trails we've actually opened with all of your jurisdiction support. So something like the thermometer thing. So I do think this is the necessary, right, foundation. You have a plan, you have a vision, we're putting resources towards it. So we got to stick with it. We got to get people to believe in it. And I do think there's more energy and enthusiasm around this vision right now, which is going to make us more competitive for funding. The hurdles are real. And Vice Chair Baumgarten knows this, right? Just with the trail up in Yuba City and the UP ownership of that. That is a very real barrier, as are some other issues around the region. But the vision is, you know, incredible, right? It's something that people really can see and that they really want. So it's really good work to start.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I'm proud to represent the district where we have the mother of all trails, the American River Parkway, right? So, no, thank you. No, I think I appreciate those comments, and thank you, Summer and me. And this is information only. Any public comments on this item, Lynette?
There's no public comment.
Okay. Thank you. Move on to our last information item.
Thank you. Our last information item is agenda item number 9, transit representation on metropolitan planning organizations and governance update MOU. And this will be presented by Eric Johnson, our SACOG staff.
Hi, good morning, members of the committee. So this morning, this item is coming to you on information. This was recommended by the Policy and Innovation Committee at their meeting this month. This is something that SACOG has brought for the last decade or so to fulfill the federal requirements about how we have transit at the table in terms of how you function as a metropolitan planning organization. And so there are really no changes from the practice, but I think it's important to just take a couple minutes to remind you all, right, that there's 16 of you who sit on local transit agency boards, whether appointed from your local jurisdiction or your jurisdiction actually runs the transit organization itself. This resolution is going to go to the full board for action as a recommendation out of the Policy and Innovation Committee. So happy to take any questions about that. And then the second part of the item, just briefly updating you all on the process of updating our federal MOU that we have with the transit operators in the region. We've been working very closely with the transit operators for about a year now on this process and hope to bring something back to you this summer to move forward on really not just fulfilling the federal requirements, but strengthening our partnership and working relationship with all the 10 local transit agencies that receive federal funding and making sure that they're fully involved in our metropolitan process and we can provide the support they need to get the capital and operating funding they need to provide their service. So happy to take any questions, but again, just for information.
Thank you, Eric. Any comments, questions?
And I just want to double down on that to say, just earlier in the items, we heard Director Early and Director Kennedy talk about with their hats on as transit districts, right? So that's exactly what we're talking about here, is bringing those interests, right, into the room. You are always balancing multiple between your jurisdiction, the different special districts and JPAs that you sit on. So that was excellent modeling. And as Eric said, this committee is going to have a lot of transit items before you this year, really important ones, SB 125, financial analyses, things the state is requiring us to do, but honestly, I think setting the foundation for how we're going to stabilize our transit operators across all 10. How are we going to meet our 2025 blueprint goals, which actually require us ideally to be investing in more frequent service and better service, more reliable service in the next 10, 15, 25 years.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on this, Madam Clerk?
There's no public comment.
Eric, please convey back to the Policy and Innovation Committee our thanks for bringing this to us here where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I think that's our last agenda item. The other item is receive and file. And see, that wasn't that bad. I mean, Christina kept saying this is going to be a 2.5-hour meeting.
You did
You know,
excellent.
You did a great job with your first meeting, so
Well,
thank
let's not
you.
prolong it and we will adjourn. Thank you very much.